world-class trainer Kevin Berry. We're here talking about the Alex Leapai fight for Joseph Parker. It was supposed to be Eric Molina. What can you say what happened with that? Because the fight's just right around the corner.
Well, you know, boxing is a very strange and funny business sometimes, and we thought we had a deal in place with Eric Molina, and we had a whole training camp geared around a 6'4" Molina, but I think the fighter was keen, but you know, his team were very difficult to work with, and that's now off the table, and we're fighting Alex Leapai. And Alex is a fighter that we know very well, a very strong, very powerful fighter, a very proud fighter. Like Joseph Parker, he's from Samoan heritage. In fact, you know, funny thing for us, we've come a full circle, because back in early 2014, Joseph Parker at that stage was 7-0, fighting Marcelo Nascimento for the interim PABA title in Germany. And the main fight on that card was Vladimir Klitschko versus Alex Leapai. And here we are, you know, many years later, fighting Alex Leapai.
And this will be the first fight to kick off the new deal with Eddie Hearn and DAZN. What can you say about that? Usually he keeps his guys, especially in the U.S. side, very active.
Well, you know, we've got off to a very slow start this year. You know, Joe fought in December of 2018, had a devastating knockout against Flores from California. Joe was redoing his promotional contract, and you know, we were as a team meeting with all the main players in the boxing world, and we formulated a deal with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, which made us part of the DAZN family. And you know, we've had a very good working relationship with Eddie Hearn over the last 18 months, with a couple of very big fights in the UK, the Anthony Joshua fight, the Dillian Whyte fight. We like the way Eddie works, we like his vision, we like his energy. He is very, very professional, has a very good team around him, and you know, so we formulated a deal for a 3-fight deal, and this is the first part of that 3-fight deal. So you know, Joe is very focused at the moment, very determined. He knows that it's very important for him to look great in his first fight, fighting for Matchroom, and he is trained accordingly.
And as part of the motivation to sign with them is that you guys want those rematches with Anthony Joshua and also with Dillian Whyte.
Well, most definitely. You know, Anthony Joshua looks like he may have his hands full right at the moment, fighting for his life in a rematch with Andy Ruiz. But, you know, Dillian Whyte, he's got a big fight coming up against Oscar Rivas. We would love nothing more than to have the opportunity to look across the ring at Dillian Whyte, and the fact that both Joseph Parker and Dillian Whyte are with Matchroom makes that that fight a definite possibility in the future.
And what did you think of Ruiz beating Joshua? And do you think Joshua has what it takes to make the adjustments needed to win the rematch?
Well, I think you know, I think there are many things that happened in that fight that Anthony Joshua will be looking at and saying, gosh, I could have done that so much better. But that's not taking anything away from Andy Ruiz, because he improved his chances by letting his hands go when he was hurt in the 3rd round. Look, I think Joshua will, I think he will come back. I think he has a very professional team, a very good coach. He has a good team around him. You know, I know he would love nothing more than a redo for some of the choices that he made in that fight. You know, when he had Andy down in the 3rd round with the right uppercut, left hook, he ran in recklessly, with no respect at all for Andy Ruiz's power. And he was, whether he was looking at the Dimitrenko fight thinking, well, you know, Andy couldn't put Dimitrenko down, how's he ever going to hurt me? We know that Andy is very powerful, he's very fast, he's a very skillful fighter. You know, Joseph Parker tells the story, it was the hardest he's ever been hit in his professional boxing career was by Andy Ruiz. So, you know, it's a heck of a lesson for Anthony Joshua to learn.
Well, and on the flip side, how much better does Joseph's win over Ruiz look now?
Well, you know, Joe, it's funny, you know, Joe's part of an unusual triangle. You know, he was
Yeah.
he was the first guy to go 12 rounds with Anthony Joshua in a fight where Joe was actually cancelled out because of the poor performance of the referee. Not allowing him to fight in close in that fight. And of course, you know, Andy has this fantastic win over Joshua, putting him on the floor 4 times. And Joe, back in December of 2016, when both fighters were undefeated, gave Andy his only loss to date, winning the WBO heavyweight world title from Andy Ruiz. So, you know, Joe's proud to be part of that triangle, and you know, we know we've got Joshua and Andy fighting the rematch later on this year. You know, no one really knows how that fight's going to unravel. But I tell you what, I think there's a very, very strong likelihood at some stage in the future, especially with Joe only being 27 years old, that he will get in the ring with both those guys. I think that Joseph Parker and Andy Ruiz are going to be a good fight every time they fight.
Yeah, their styles seem to match up pretty well. And just, do you think Joshua, I mean, if you had to bet right now, who would you think wins that rematch with him and Ruiz?
Gosh, you know, I tell you what, I think it's he's going to have to not only make a physical adjustment, but a major mental adjustment. There were a lot of things that just weren't quite right in that fight, from his body language to the way he fought. I think to the way he to the way he trained. And let's remember, I don't know how he trained, but I know that when I sat there with my son Taylor and Joseph Parker at the weigh-in, and I looked at him, and he weighed the same as he weighed when he fought Joe. But I said to Joe, his body looks totally different. He was nowhere near as defined. So I don't know what that means, if there were different types of training that he did, but as I mentioned before, he has a very professional team. They'll be evaluating everything, and they'll be making the necessary changes to hopefully get a better result in the rematch. But let's remember, Andy Ruiz will also be a better fighter in the rematch, which is going to make things very difficult for Anthony Joshua.
I was going to ask you that. I agree with you to an extent, but we've seen Andy has done a lot of more media, a lot more traveling, which comes with becoming a champion, unified champion, first Mexican champion. Is it possible, though, that there may be a little bit too much self-indulgence between fights, if you know what I mean?
No, I tell you what, Andy deserves all the praise and accolades that he's getting at the moment, and why should he not be paraded around and celebrated? You know, he just beat the so-called baddest man on the planet. He was a massive underdog. You know, I stood up at a press conference on the Friday, the day before the fight in New York, where Eddie Hearn asked me to speak about both guys. And I talked about the strengths of Andy Ruiz. And I also talked how I thought the odds makers were completely balmy. They had missed it entirely, you know, having Andy a 40-to-1 underdog. You know, Andy Ruiz, and I'm not saying this because he has now put Joshua on his back. This is before the Joshua fight I was saying this. He should be in everybody's top 10. He's a very skillful guy. He's got very fast hands for a heavyweight. He throws terrific combinations, and he's not afraid. And his whole career, he's fought much taller. He's given away height and reach in nearly every single fight. You know, it was a shock to the world, but not quite as big of a shock to our team, because, you know, we've studied Andy and we've known him for a long time.